wondering what President Zelensky's state of mind is like in Kyiv at this moment, when from across the Atlantic comes murmuring news that the White House leader has set a final deadline. Western media asserts that before this year's Thanksgiving, the Ukrainian leader will have to sign a peace plan drafted by Washington. Some arguments suggest that perhaps Trump wants to wrap everything up before the turkey dinner to avoid distractions. Many analyses say that the circulating 28-point content, despite being covered in new terminology, is not much different from previous agreements that have collapsed. What's noteworthy is that the Ukrainian leader himself has hinted that they must prepare for the most difficult since the country entered the conflict. The question here is not just whether to sign or not, but who is making that decision. Observers note that the feeling of being cornered is becoming increasingly clear. Many Ukrainians are confused if peace comes from the hands of another country, how much autonomy they would retain. A country at war can suffer many losses, but losing their voice in matters that determine the future, that makes public opinion in the region inevitably concerned. For the first time since 2022, people are witnessing a large number of skeptical opinions surrounding whether the West is prioritizing their interests over those of Kyiv. Pressure from Washington makes Kyiv hope that Europe will speak out more strongly as a necessary counterbalance. But ironically, just when consensus is most important, Europe is like a meal table that has just been overturned, with disagreements from major to minor issues. Most typical is the fact that two partners once considered pillars, France and Germany, are now openly shook. Some analysts smirk, suggesting that historical cracks never disappeared. They just waited silently for an opportunity to. Looking deeper into the issue, public opinion questions whether the confrontation between France and Germany never truly ended. European history over thousands of years is like a tug-of-war between two nations sharing common origins but divided into different directions. From the Middle Ages to the 20th century, prolonged battles left them with indelible prejudices. Many Germans still view the French as symbols of quick surrender, while many French see Germany through the lens of a militaristic past. Some comments suggest that whenever military sovereignty or political influence is touched upon, this competition sprouts like grass after rain. After World War II, everything seemed settled. France strong in military, Germany strong. Both were satisfied with their roles in Europe's security and economic structure. But moving to the present, that stability is clearly shaken, especially since Germany recorded the strong rise of politically conservative and hardline groups. Germany's new chancellor, a figure endlessly discussed in European media, publicly declared that the old continent must quickly become self-reliant and cannot depend on American. Many question whether this is a legitimate desire or an ambition to reshape Germany's position in the European order. What stirs public opinion is the chancellor's family background. A portion of analysts believe that his continuous mention of the risk of Russia attacking Europe, even changing the timeline year by year, could be leveraged to promote large-scale rearmament. That line of argument reminds many of historical periods when Germany used fear to build military strength. Meanwhile, the Berlin government is proposing a defense budget among the largest in Europe, far surpassing many other countries in both scale and speed. Many question whether this is genuine defensive measures or an effort to re-establish power within the EU. While Germany accelerates, France falls into difficult circumstances. Public debt reaches levels equivalent to countries that have defaulted, while military capability, always France's pride, faces the problem of resource shortages. Whispers within the EU suggest that France is gradually losing its position as the continent's spiritual leader. The comparison between the two countries is becoming increasingly intense and no longer just about history, but has shifted to competing for leadership roles in the European security structure. When disputes erupt between the two locomotives, the consequences spread. The project to develop a new generation fighter jet, once seen as a symbol of strategic cooperation, now faces the risk of collapse. Berlin accuses Paris of wanting to control too much, while Paris fears Germany would use the project as a springboard to expand military influence. Spain remains neutral and silent, leading many experts to believe this is essentially another confrontation between France and Germany. This tense atmosphere leads observers to think that if even a strategic project cannot maintain unity, then the EU's ability to sustainably support Ukraine is certainly in serious doubt. If the disagreements between France and Germany are enough to shake Europe, then Belgium's entry into the story makes the situation even more chaotic. This small country unexpectedly became the focus when the EU demanded the use of frozen Russian assets, mostly held in Belgium's financial system, to support Ukraine. For Brussels, this is no different from a gamble, because if Russia later demands compensation, Belgium will bear most of those, but surprisingly, most are avoiding it. While there, when the rice and wine run out, so does run out. Parallel to these disputes, Sweden also spoke up, expressing frustration at having to shoulder aid for Ukraine while many large countries seem to want to stay out. An immediate question arises. Why should a country with such a small population pay a higher price than even the countries that once most strongly advocated? This comparison has left some European leaders embarrassed, because the call for unity sounds very grand. But when it comes to opening their wallets, not every country is equally enthusiastic. Amid countless voices, Hungary continues to hold its ground, opposing escalation, opposing pushing Europe deeper in the conflict, and opposing turning the EU into a tool for any strategy not decided by Europe itself. However, Budapest's persistence in its own stance has also landed it on a list of difficult. Thus, the divisions within the bloc become even more apparent, while also showing that member states are acting more according to their own pragmatic interests and a common goal. Overall, Europe is in a state where every country wants to occupy the highest moral ground, but is unwilling to pay the corresponding price. Many slogans of unity are still repeated in conferences, but behind the scenes, disputes over power, economics, and military roles are the real factors driving the decision-making process. Meanwhile, dissenting voices are quickly accused of lacking ally spirit. But even internally, among the countries that once appeared most steadfast in their anti-Russia, fatigue is setting in. Most notably, while the EU constantly talks about unity, they themselves reveal deep disagreements precisely why the strongest unity is needed. Experts note that upon closer examination, this division did not start with the conflict in Ukraine, but has been simmering for years, from the immigration crisis, budget disputes, North-South economic difference, and especially the fact that Germany and France no longer find common ground in long term. It's just that now, faced with a prolonged conflict, these cracks are magnified, so clear they cannot be hidden. In this overall picture, Ukraine also has to admit they're in a passive position. Looking for Washington, they see conditions. Looking for Europe, they see division. Looking for neighboring countries, they see aid sources drying up. It's understandable why President Zelensky appears stressed in his recent statements, because he needs a strong, united, and lasting alliance. But what he's getting is a Europe that is tired, divided, and even suspicious of each other. From a pragmatic perspective, the EU countries themselves understand they are facing an existential. If they allow the divisions among major countries within the bloc to continue growing on the world geopolitical map, Europe's strength has never lain in its military, but lies in the uniformity of economic and diplomatic decision. If this advantage is lost, it will become a loose collection of medium and small economies, easily dominated by rising superpowers. When putting all the pieces together, one can understand why analysts worry that Europe may struggle to maintain the strength to support Ukraine, as they did in 2022. Not because they don't want to, but because they no longer have sufficient no longer have consensus, and more importantly, no longer share a common vision for the continent's future. Some countries want to increase militarization, some only want to protect their domestic. Some are concerned about border security, and some are wary of being drawn into superpower confrontations. In that labyrinth of interests, it's hard to find a way out. President Zelensky's situation is like someone trying to balance on a tightrope, with the US pushing from one side, the EU wavering, and the domestic situation fluctuating on. In the current geopolitical game, no one can win, but internal unity is lacking. As predicament, the haven haven't helped Ukraine turn the situation around, but has started confronting each other. Some commentators sarcastically remark that perhaps the only thing they agree is that others shouldn't see their disagreements. Unfortunately, what happens in conferences, defense projects, and financial debates has exposed everything. Ultimately, the most important question remains unanswered. Or will President Zelensky himself become the one to bear the consequences from conflicts beyond Ukraine's control?
Like the journey? Subscribe and join the next expedition.